Hello, Rick here, and we've already covered the first of the colony vessels that made its way to the Halcyon system, the Groundbreaker, which made the journey as planned and spent the remainder of its time fending off the corporate interests of the governing Halcyon Holdings board. But what of its less fortunate sister ship and the origin of the player character? This is the twisted fate of the UDL-002, the Hope. Needless to say, this video contains storyline, quest and lore spoilers, so if you want to avoid all of this, click away now, but please come back. If not for me, then maybe for Pavadi? The second ship to launch, the UDL-002, was a Universal Defense Logistic financed vessel. The captain was Wilhelm Hunt, a former accountant for gala cruises on ocean liners around the Earth. It had been his job to budget for these and was always thorough in his allocation of safety equipment, a trait that eventually got him fired. The captain ruminates on this in one of his logs, stating that the UDL mantra is prevention over preparation. Why bother spending a ton on lifeboats when you can just make a sturdier vessel, or hire better crews to negate accidents? As we have seen in history and will see again, this is a titanic mistake. The executive officer was his wife, Donna Hunt, and their small son, Lucas, accompanied them as a colonist for this 10-year exodus to Halcyon. The chief engineer was Frank Nolder, by all accounts a brash individual with a few rough edges, but a mind for machines. The navigator was one Rezi Terega, who preferred space travel to Earth and was glad to be setting off for new horizons. The medical chief was Alexei Volkov, and together these five made up the senior staff, but there were many others on the vessel, such as custodial engineer Thurston Stallworth. The UDL provided equipment and rations for this 10-year journey, and only this trip. Packing rations such as boar-wurst and other commercially endorsed products, this caused Chief Frank Nolder no small amount of discomfort as he complained about the quality of the rations to the medical officer, Alexei, who tells him to get used to it or starve. At the edge of the solar system, before they made the skip jump to faster than light, the crew took a moment to look back at Earth and shared sentiments. Frank Nolder suggests a moment of silence, or should we make a toast? Anything? Feels weird. And Captain Hunt replies with, no, from now on, we only look forward. A skip jump takes a substantial amount of fuel to initiate, but exponentially less once they're underway, and the navigational calculations can take months to plot out, so everything needs to be exacting. Interstellar travel isn't easy. The jump was calculated and the crew set off into their new lives, but none of them would ever make it. Racing across the stars, Donna and Wilhelm talk about their son and how he will still be 6 when they arrive in Halcyon, but they'll be in their late 50s. Despite this, things worked out according to plan until the 9th year of their trip. During the captain's off hours, navigator Rezi calls attention to the Hunts that the Hope is off course. Examining the scrolling banks of data, she points out that the alteration in course is seemingly due to the colony ship slowing down. During the explanation, a shudder rocks the Hope, and Nolder radios up in a confused panic, asking who hit the brakes. The Hope has suddenly dropped out of its skip jump, as if the engines were simply deactivated. During a staff meeting, Nolder explains the situation and that the fuel reserves left might not be enough to accelerate the vessel back to FTL. On top of this, navigator Rezi Terega needs to create a whole new course solution before they can jump again. Captain Hunt dwells on this issue in a personal log, comparing it to his time as an accountant for the UDL cruises. Used to running the numbers for ocean liners, his estimations for safety gear would always be reduced, and now the same issues are occurring here with hundreds of thousands of colonists' lives on the line. Chief Engineer Frank Nolder has confirmed that the engines won't spool up again. In the automated log, navigator Terega has concluded that a sublight journey would take 26 years to complete, and that with the feeble budgetary operating system of the Hope, many of the intricacies would be left to her to calculate. The biggest issue now is rations. Captain Hunt informs the crew that 1 year's worth of food is all they have left. Frank Nolder immediately becomes fearful of starvation, saying he's seen people go insane after a week without food. Whatever life he led before this journey must have been a harsh one. Over the following months, the remaining rations are accounted for and distributed. Everyone is hungry, but what other alternative is there? In this expanse of nothing, the next stop is Halcyon, where food will be plentiful, but they need to last long enough to reach there. His wife, Donna, meanwhile retrieves some seeds that were given to her by her mother for her to plant her own garden in Halcyon one day. Setting up a small hydroponics bay, she begins to tend to a small crop of tomatoes, lemons and limes. All her hopes lie in these delicate sprouts, and if it works, then their crisis may be alleviated. One shift, Navigator Resi comes to see Captain. A cryopod tampering alarm has been tripped, and an investigation reveals that one of the colonists has gone missing from their slumber. Around this time too, Captain Hunt notices that there are rations left over. It's an issue for two reasons. Firstly, if someone on the crew isn't eating their allotted amount, someone's performance may be suffering from a lack of food, endangering them all. Or, alternatively, someone has their own supply they've been dipping into and not sharing. Frank Nolder points out that confiscating someone's own reserve is stealing, but Captain Hunt counters with survival being key. Meanwhile, there is an ominous log that reads from Nolder, "Lord help me, it worked. I'm going to hell, but it worked. Now, how do I break the news to the captain?" This ill tiding forebodes of the grim events to come. Chief Frank Nolder comes forward as the one who's been skipping rations, and Hunt pressures him to continue to eat. He can't risk the health of his chief engineer. Frank point blank refuses to eat any more rations and begins to show insubordinate attitudes when he says that the captain's orders might not mean much now in this situation. Hunt argues that now more than ever it matters. Later, a rigged up security camera pings Frank Nolder meddling with another colonist-filled cryopod. I don't know why Frank would start waking people up. We're short on food as it is. Confused by this, Hunt orders security to bring Nolder to his quarters to question his strange behaviour. Things quickly turn sour as Captain Hunt interrogates Frank and discovers the colonists that went missing were eaten by his chief engineer. He immediately calls down Resi and Alexei, two of the senior staff, and puts Nolder in the brig, disgusted by his actions. On top of all this, Donna Hunt's crops have finally failed, the fruit withering on their stems. There is only a month of rations left, and it's been over a year into their journey. 25 more to go. Rumours of Nolder's cannibalism spread throughout the crew, and fueled by hunger and fear, Donna notes some of the crew are too far gone, and that the captain has to bar the way. Several have been imprisoned for attempting to access the slumbering colonists in their care. Pained by hunger cramps, Donna Hunt can understand their primal urge to sate their appetites, and just when she begins to entertain the idea, she thinks of her 6-year-old son in cryo, and all the other families waking up to find their loved ones gone, or never waking up at all. And that stops her. Things erupt aboard the Hope. Someone has set Frank Nolder free, and the captain makes an announcement that declares Frank an enemy, and anyone who aids him will be imprisoned for the duration of the trip too. While searching for Nolder, sides form between those who want to survive and those who want to find another way. There was constant fighting among the halls as the crew turned on one another and even managed to gain access to more cryopods. Bolstered by their renewed strength and bellies gorged on the flesh of those they were meant to protect, Nolder and his crew lure others over with promises of relief from hunger. Among those tempted were Dr. Alexei and Donna Hunt, the captain's wife. After succumbing to her hunger, she took a bite of human flesh offered to her by Frank. Instantly she felt relieved and euphoric as her starved body reacted to the sustenance. So disgusted at her own behaviour, she locked herself in the captain's cabin and broke the lock, allowing herself to starve to death. Her husband learned of this and steeled his resolve. Now his only ally was navigator Resi, the last of those loyal to Hunt. Together they made their way to the bridge to make a final stand, informing her that his wife won't be joining them. He manages to completely lock down the cryobays, denying the savage former crew of their food source, and then locks himself and Resi on the bridge. Frank Nolder reaches the Hope's control centre and, unable to get in, argues that the Hope needs its crew alive, or no one on the ship will make it, not even the colonists. And Captain Hunt is willing to gamble that the auto-navigation programmed by Resi could make it to Halcyon. After hours of trying fruitlessly to get into the bridge, the drilling stops, and Resi suggests that Frank might be heading down to the cryobays. If the cannibals can access more colonists to eat, then they could simply outlast the captain and navigator, who have only days of rations left between them. Hunt makes the decision to confront Frank and his followers, and leaves Resi on the bridge to finish the calculations. The captain heads down to confront Nolder, and is never heard from again. But just beyond the confines of the sealed bridge, we can find a body of an interstellar crew member with a tool wedged into his heart. Is this Captain Wilhelm Hunt? Days later, there has been no sound from beyond the bridge doors, and to Resi, it appears all are dead. I'm done. The course is set, I'm down to my last day of food, and I don't want to die like Donna did. Fly true, Hope. Frank and his mutineers, meanwhile, survived his encounter with the captain, as a log in Cryobay 12 confirms. After what must have been many more months of slowly traversing the interstellar void, Nolder discovers that the colonists, once thawed, immediately turn into a grey, indigestible gloop, as seen by the sludgy stains around the pods. He comes to the conclusion that they'll probably starve now anyway, but I suspect that now their humanity is no longer restraining them, the surviving cannibals turned on each other until there was truly nothing, and no one left to eat. Bay 12 is filled with discarded pods, like clamshells cast aside, their contents consumed, so it appears that the Hope's crew managed to get a lot of use out of their inhabitants. The UDL-002's logs recalled that the bay of 10,000 slumbering people has been reduced by 24%, as Nolder and his cannibals tried again and again to desperately find a human that would survive the revitalization process. Clearly, they did not. Dr. Phineas V. Wells arrives on the Hope, a vessel 25 years late to the system, and the autopilot fulfilling its mission and delivering the colonists. However, the board has abandoned the vessel. Financially, economically and resource-wise, they don't have room or a plan for an influx of new colonists. On top of this, cryo-induced liquefaction sets in when they were revived, as they'd been in suspended animation too long. Wells is confident that he can revive them, but corporate denies his experiments. Comparing himself to Isaac Newton, he declares in his logs that genius is not beholden to the vicissitudes of bureaucracy, and sets off to revive them in secret. He is rather callous about the whole affair, but after 12 subjects die from explosive cell death and liquidated before him, 3 degrees above freezing, his logs take on a detached tone as he begins to question the morality of experimentation. He recalls certain specifics of the colonists he's trying to save, perhaps to try to save something, or perhaps save his own humanity. Sometime within the last 34 years of his experimentation, however, the board discovers his illicit acts and brands him as a criminal with a long list of charges. He enacts his escape plan and continues to steal pods from the Hope, continuing his research in secret aboard his hidden asteroid laboratory in the rings of Terra 2. Eventually, he makes one last run for the Hope, selects Storage Bay 5, pod CB5524, and defrosts its occupant. You, the player character. Of all the colonists that were ferried onto the UDL-002, the Hope, most made the journey, but according to its logs, around 2,400 people are missing from Bay 12, 800 from Bay 8, and 1 from Bay 5. And that one, you, is going to have to decide what happens to not only the remaining colonists of the Hope, but the rest of mankind in the Halcyon system. No pressure. So, there we have it. A breakdown of the events that occurred after the Hope's drive failed and stranded the vessel and its over 100,000 occupants in the void. There are still unanswered questions, like what happened to cause the drive to shut off in the first place. Nolder's logs indicate that he could not locate the issue, just that they would not start up again, and the exact fate of Captain Hunt is unknown. Thank you all for watching. This might be the last Outer Worlds lore video for a while, but I'll probably continue this series at a later date as time permits, maybe even do a playthrough on the channel on the side. Star Trek lore is what I'm known for, and that won't be going anywhere, but it's good to branch out every now and then, so thank you again for watching these videos. And until the next one, I've been Captain Rick, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.